Now, should Christmas parties be cancelled? We've had some mixed messages from the government this week because we've had Dr. Jenny Harries, of course, the head of the UK Health Security Agency, that used to be known as Public Health England. But have you noticed how everything's now a security thing? And we're talking about energy security, health security and all the rest of it. So Dr. Jenny Harries was slapped down by 10 Downing Street because she said people should not socialise when we don't particularly need to. And of course, Downing Street was asked about that and said she is an advisor to the government. She is not the government. Then we had Therese Coffey, the Work and Pension Secretary, saying you shouldn't be snogging someone you don't know under the mistletoe. I mean, surely that's the point of Christmas parties. I mean, what's the point of going to a Christmas party if you can't do something you later have to apologise for? That's my point. Anyway, and then Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, says there's no need to call off Christmas parties despite the emergence of Omicron, the new variant. He's urged people to get a booster jab to fight COVID. He said people should consider measures such as taking COVID tests before they go to a Christmas party or wearing face masks when socialising. But NHS providers said some NHS trusts had asked staff not to mix in big groups. I mean, there's just so many mixed messages about this. Omicron, of course, doesn't seem to be that virulent. There don't seem to be too many cases. But, of course, the worry is that the vaccines won't be able to fight it, although the cases seem to be pretty mild already. So there's a lot of confusion about this. Let's get into this in terms of whether Christmas parties should be cancelled. What do you think? Will you be cancelling your Christmas party? Or do you think, do you know what? I've had it up to here with COVID for the last nearly 2 years now. We've been locked down, we've been working from home, we've been doing wearing face masks, we've been doing all sorts of things. So why can't we just go out and have a Christmas party and enjoy ourselves after a really tough year? Everybody's been working really hard, and Christmas parties are a chance to let off a bit of steam and, you know, get to know the person from accounts who you perhaps quite like the look of. Anyway, Mike Buckley is here. He's a broadcaster and journalist, and Alan Miller is the co-founder of Recovery and Nighttime Industries as well. You're both very, very welcome to Talk Radio this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe I can start with you, Mike. You think we should be cancelling Christmas parties. Why do you think that?
I don't necessarily think we should be cancelling Christmas parties, but I think the focus on Christmas parties is the wrong focus. We should be focusing on where people gather together, whether that is a Christmas party or whether it's anywhere else, whether it's a school, whether it's a workplace, whether it's transport, whether it's out shopping, you know, wherever it is that we go, where there are lots of people, that's where this virus will be transmitted. That could be a Christmas party, but actually the vast majority of events and places where we gather over the next, you know, few weeks will not be Christmas parties. So I think we're again focusing on the wrong thing. We should be saying to the government, why are you not giving us clear messaging and telling us how dangerous this thing is, as far as you are aware, and then telling us what we can do to keep ourselves, our family members, our colleagues, our elderly relatives safe. And that's what they're signally failing to do. And I honestly think this conversation about Christmas parties is a side issue. And I kind of think actually it just lets the government off the hook, because while we're all talking about Christmas parties, they're getting away with not giving us clear messaging that can keep us and the people we care about safe.
Okay, Alan Miller, what do you make of that?
I think it's correct that the messaging is confusing and very problematic. I think we should take note from the messages from South Africa from the variety of doctors that have pointed out that they're very mild symptoms. And as we know, when a virus mutates and it has different elements of variants, it could spread much quicker, but it's far less impacting in terms of serious health and deaths, which is a great thing. We have many people who are immune because they've had COVID, and we've had 90% of the population vaccinated. 13 million have had boosters now. At what point are we going to get back to normality? Mike makes the point that we should look at all places where people congregate. Everyone should be congregating normally together again now in society. We have over 5 million people waiting on the NHS for treatment of all sorts of different health issues. Everyone seems to have forgotten that. We've now got, GPs not seeing over 75-year-olds, the highest risk sector, the demographic, because they're going to be boosting younger people. You just think, the point is that we should not be having masks as mandated. We should be back to normal now, right? We should have a situation where we are engaged, we're dealing with the problems that have come as a consequence of lockdown, and recognize objectively the information that's come from South Africa that's being presented by the doctors that have seen it, and acknowledge that, not have a knee-jerk precautionary response. When in doubt, regulate and impose things.
Because a lot of people feel that's what's happened, don't they, Alan, in terms of what the Prime Minister announced last week. Of course, he hadn't actually heard the word Omicron until about 10 days ago in relation to this virus anyway. And he then very quickly, within 2 days, of course, there was a press conference last Saturday, announced all these restrictions. Of course, the Prime Minister was criticised for not acting quickly enough in regard to the Delta variant. Do you think he's acted too quickly? You're talking about a knee-jerk reaction there to Omicron?
Yeah, I think the problem is, right, the problem is that people always want to look like they're doing something. Doing something can also mean encouraging everyone to put best foot forward and engage normally in society. It does not necessarily have to mean interventions and impositions, certainly not mandating activity at this point. If every time something comes up, and there are going to be many, many variants, right? If every time something comes up, we then start having impositions, we're never going to get out of this situation, right? We've got a situation where, we've seen that the situation is that they're mild, but the damage we're doing, on the one hand, it's to sectors and events and businesses and the big four and all the companies that are stopping events, right? So there's a financial component. But there's also a psychological component and a moral component to all of this, right? Which is that we as citizens, and Mike's point about they should be clear about things, it's true, but also we've become far too dependent and they've become far too comfortable with making sanctions from up high. What free societies are people that go and conduct themselves and engage with one another, take personal responsibility. And that's why we're encouraging people to sign the togetherdeclaration.org. We have a big campaign next week where we're saying to people, actually go and let your MPs hear from you. Let them hear what you think about these impositions, particularly vaccine passports. Because we want people now, we want MPs and elected representatives to hear from ordinary people that actually this is now, we need to get back to normal together.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. Mike, you've been waiting patiently. What do you make of what you've heard from Alan there?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. One, in terms of the NHS waiting list, and there are millions, probably way over 5 million now, because it was a while ago that the 5 figure came out. There's millions of people on the NHS waiting list. If you want those people seen, and I certainly do, then we need to make sure that hospitals and GP surgeries in any NHS environment is free of people who've got serious cases of COVID. If you want that, then you need to mitigate COVID and you need to stop people getting it. So that's point one. The second point on Omicron, people are saying it's mild. There's no evidence that it's mild at all. The first few cases in South Africa were among young people. So of course they were mild cases because most young people get it fairly mildly. But actually there's zero evidence that it's going to be any less impactful on health than any other variant that we've had. And in fact, there's one indication that it could be worse, and I say could because of course we need more time to analyze the evidence. But there's one indication that it could be worse because higher numbers or a high proportion of children who get it are being hospitalized. Now, it's very early days, so that is not conclusive, but we need to give the scientists time to work out what is this variant, what does it do to people, is it worse for kids? If it is, then of course we need to respond to that. But even if it's just the same as all the others, then we have to respond to that, or we'll see unacceptable levels of hospitalizations and deaths. And I hate even saying that phrase, because why have we even got to the point where we think there is an acceptable level of hospitalizations and deaths?
Mike, I agree with you. This is a wider issue than Christmas parties. You've made that point very clearly and very eloquently. But I just want to, just on the Christmas parties aspect, I want to ask Alan, who is, of course, with the Nighttime Industries Association, how devastating would it be to your members if people people have already started cancelling Christmas parties. I know because I've been invited to some that have been cancelled. Tell us about your members, the kind of journey they've been through in the last couple of years, the impact on hospitality that lockdown and these restrictions have had.
Well, I should say that I was the founder of the NTIA and the first chair, but now I'm actually at the Together Declaration. But across hospitality, what we've seen is that from hotels to events, huge, big corporate events, which every year bring in a lot of the lion's share of revenue, to small boutique events, they've been cancelled en masse. We've got a situation where people have panicked. They've heard these things. They've seen the mask mandate. They now see these announcements. We all get twitchy because we know as soon as these press conferences come on, and even when the government says they're not going to do something, that often means they are going to do it a week later. So people have got nervous from the investment point of view and also from actually what it might mean. And this idea that Mike says, SAGE are now pushing, right, very strongly and heavily to have more restrictions and impositions. And this idea, now it'd be one thing to wait and see, wait and see. That's fine, right? So let's wait and see with the government. Don't impose particularly restrictions that are farcical, are not consistent across the board, and make no sense at all whatsoever. It's really insulting. And I think the thing is that, obviously revenue and business is enormously impacted. We see what that means in terms of employment. Don't forget, it's the third biggest sector in Britain now. We've lost hundreds of thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of venues during lockdown. This is a real blow, mortal blow.
Yeah.
It's also the case that looking at evidence and seeing, if you actually look at all the things that doctors, Bloomberg did a brilliant article yesterday that have actually given a proper chronology of what's happened. We need to, if we're going to assess things, carry on as normal, assess things objectively, calmly and rationally. Yep. Don't start making impositions. That's why we ask everyone to sign the Together Declaration.org. We'll have a big campaign next week.
We've had a couple of texters who have got in touch. One anonymous person says, thank God COVID didn't recognise the G7, COP26 or the football, which is a fair point there. Jane has got in touch to say, hi Peter, the people who haven't lost one penny during this pandemic, telling people who have tried to make ends meet, we don't care if your business closes down, if people want to stay at home, if not carry on your life, says Jane. I just want to give the final word in this debate to Mike Buckley. Mike, what do you make of what you've heard? What's the sort of final point that you'd want to get across this morning?
I think the final point I want to make is that, of course, I care, and we all care about businesses, including hospitality and, the creative industries. And I mean, I've done a lot of work over the last few years. All the people that fell through furlough, including a lot of people in hospitality, a lot of people in the creative industries. Rishi Sunak's really got away with it. They did furlough, that helped people on PAYE, but there were millions of people who weren't helped. And I did quite a lot of writing on that and trying to communicate on that, because that's something that actually I deeply care about. I mean, I run a small business. I didn't get any help from the government either. So I've got through this. I've lost a lot of money. I earned a lot less than last year than I earned the year before because of COVID. Yeah. So this isn't about, do I care about people who've lost out? Of course I do. I'm one of them.
Oh, I'm sure you do. Absolutely, Mike. Yeah. Listen, sorry.
It is about
finish your point.
No, that's it. I was just going to say, the conclusion is we've got to save lives and we've got to save businesses. And if hospitality needs to take a break over Christmas or for longer, the government should recompense you. I fully believe that.
Okay, I don't think Alan agrees with you on that, but listen, thank you. We've run out of time, but thank you both very, very much indeed. Mike Buckley, broadcaster and journalist, and Alan Miller, who, of course, was one of the founders of the Nighttime Industries Association, but is now with the Together Declaration, #Together Declaration. So